which I got interference, but
Okay. Yeah, so our next item is brought by our fellow committee member here, Councilmember Robinson. It's on decriminalizing entheogenic plants. Please.
All right. We have a funny meeting here today. Both of the items that we're looking at are items that Oakland just adopted recently, interestingly, but I hope we'll find that they're good things to do and the right thing to do, not just because Oakland did them, but because they're good policy. What we have before us today is a resolution to decriminalize entheogenic plants. It's entheogenic, which refers to the class of plants and fungi with hallucinogenic qualities, which it's important to note are currently classified as Schedule I drugs in the United States. We just passed out a couple amendments that are mostly just further fleshing out the background and the whereases of the reports and the resolution. And we bring this because it's the right thing to do, because it's consistent with a sensible drug policy. We know that international policy around these plants, around these fungi, is wildly inconsistent, but here in the United States we see some of those inconsistencies too, where exceptions for certain classes of these plants are granted for cultural reasons in one place or another, but the research around this has evolved so much in the last few years. And we know now that there are meaningful and compelling medical and medicinal and clinical applications of these plants. And so what we're looking to do here today is the first baby step. In many ways, the similar advocacy strategy that ultimately led to the changing dynamic that we've seen for marijuana in the United States. The first baby step is to set the criminalization of these plants, use and consumption of them, as the absolute lowest priority for local law enforcement. So you can imagine a day where years from now, doctors working with patients with serious depression or veterans dealing with PTSD could actually offer them a more realistic and comprehensive suite of potential treatments, which may include some of these plants, as the research over the last several decades has indicated. I am under no delusion that there is significant activity around these plants and these drugs in the city of Berkeley, or that our police department is spending much time, energy, or resources punishing people for using them. But it is a meaningful and deeply important move and position for our city to take. And we will be joining, to my knowledge, only 2 other cities in the country, Oakland and Denver, in decriminalizing entheogenic plants. The wave would grow from there. We know the effect that Berkeley has on our neighboring cities and the progressive network across the country, and I hope we can be a part of it.
Excellent. Any public comment on this matter? Please.
Several, and if you don't mind, I'd like a chance to sort of take this from a sort of I'm going to build an arc of possibilities. If creating a hypothesis, in the days of Prohibition, people were aware of the qualities of alcohol. It was something that was historically in our existence. However, if you say buy a glass of scotch today, you know that it's made by a credible company, that it has a tax stamp, that it has gone through, let's say, a sort of a lifespan of legislation, as well as development of invention, the actual invention of the drink, because you have rubbing alcohol, you have the use of alcohol, specifically for internalizing. Being one who's been an advocate of the legalization of marijuana, I personally felt that it might have gone a little bit too fast, because in the process of legalizing it, we still don't know if it's benefiting the public, the consumer, the retailer, or the state at large. So when you add to that element the possibility of a hallucinogenic, the question is, well, do you want to speak easy, or should it go to retailers? Is a doctor under strict, are there strict regulations that limit it strictly to that patient, or can you give it to his son, for God's sakes? Or can you leave the stuff sitting on the table? There are basics about legalizing something and then controlling it as a substance. Granted that, example, acid could be accidentally processed in the body by food poisoning. You can eat cheese or bread mold and come to the, almost the equivalent at, it's a bad high, but it's a sort of an unprocessed way that essence is made. So in terms of the responsibility of handling the substance of the public, as the name goes up, how do you keep from getting doused? How do you keep it from getting in your foot? How do you keep it from becoming part of the garbage pile? Right now, I believe, and thank you for the extra time, right now, that is my concern with marijuana, which I'm an advocate of, but the regulation should be one that doesn't in no way harm school children or set itself up for abolition.
Thank you.
So, about a month ago, for reasons I won't get into, I found myself in a support group in Oakland for people who were either interested in or were using whatever the word is, eugenic drugs. And people went around the room and they told their stories. And I was rather stunned because there were about 25 people there, and about, I would say, 20 of them mentioned that they were treating depression or PTSD or a combination of that, and it was helping them significantly. They believed it was helping them significantly. And I think you understand how many people in this country have depression at this point. And to deny what has been pretty much now demonstrated as a reasonable treatment possibility to help people, I think is tragic. And I think what you're proposing is extremely good idea as a first step. So I just wanted to relate that to you. I think it's like really important for some people to feel comfortable in experimenting with this and just trying it out, because a lot of people just aren't comfortable doing anything that might be, very illegal. And it starts the process anyway. So that's all I have to say.
My name is Larry Norris. I'm executive director of a federally approved nonprofit called ERIE, Empty-Genic Research Integration Education. We do a lot of education and support within the Bay Area. I was also on the board of the Decriminalized Nature Crew in Oakland. I just want to kind of give you some stats with that. We had a really great time putting it together. We actually talked with the law enforcement there. Deputy Chief of Police was fantastic, really doing his research on how this all works. The council member, Noel Guile, who's the sponsor, was also the chair of the Public Safety Committee meeting. So we approved through that. During our Public Safety Committee meeting, we had doctors and researchers and therapists, et cetera, coming in to talk about the benefits of these medicines for people throughout the world, not just for medical practitioners, but also for understanding, creativity, spirituality, these types of things. So it was a really great meeting. So both Councilmember Gallo and the Deputy Chief of Police in Oakland would be more than happy to talk to anyone that needs any more questions or has any more questions on this. Also, we would love to be able to create a partnership between Berkeley and Oakland, which would be fantastic. Be able to support the education and support services throughout Berkeley and Oakland and actually work together as a team. So that's really important as we start rolling out this. And then finally, what would be great is also if this is kind of happening all over the place right now. We're also Port Townsend, Washington. They're meeting with their county Thursday. Santa Cruz is talking to their people as well. There's about 100 cities across the U.S. that are ready to do this, so it'd be great if Berkeley could really be in the front of that with Oakland, coming together, figuring out how to make this work so that other cities across the U.S. can actually replicate what's happening here. And then just one little quick thing. I noticed in the resolution there's one little change about there being a doctor's recommendation. Currently, the medical system is obviously very against this because it sort of impacts the pharmaceutical industry, so to speak, right? You have something that cures depression in one or two, or can help with depression in one or two servings. It doesn't work so well for the pharmaceutical industry. So there might be some challenges around that where doctors might not recommend this for that reason. And then secondly, I noticed that the tryptamine, phenethylamine, and indolamine footnote had fallen off. So that might be something that you want to put back in there, just because I think it might also mean that entheogenic is a word that can be very broad, so this might decriminalize everything, which if that's okay for Berkeley, that's great too. You'd be the first one doing that, but that might be something I just want to address in there, so. Thanks.
If I may, just briefly, because I don't want to.
It's a one-shot deal.
Well, if it's quick. The only point I was re-emphasizing is that in the process of legalizing this, you gotta try to imagine 50 people that have smoked pot on the train at the same time, or people that have done psychedelics at the same time, or whether they drank. I really don't think that we have matured well enough on the legalization of marijuana as a structure. I think it's a great idea. I'm not opposed to it.
Got it. Thank you.
Got it? But we're in trouble with the way that we're right now with the clubs. We gotta set an example so that people feel that they're getting
Thank you.
good product. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Sorry.
Good, thank you.
Jeff
Okay.
Crone. I'm a therapist in the area, live in Berkeley, District 5, and I've worked with psychedelic risk reduction at festivals, Burning Man, Lightning in a Bottle, private events. I was a student member of Erie while I was in graduate school at California Institute of Integral Studies. And I've seen firsthand the kind of healing and connection that these plants and fungi can facilitate. And I'm kind of here on behalf of all the people that I've witnessed and sat with who have experienced healing. And I urge you to kind of follow through with this and pass this. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Zach. Hope you all remember me from my time at the Berkeley Senior Cooperative. However, now I'm speaking to you as a private citizen, actually in the Berkeley District. And I want to commend you all for taking this proposal into consideration, especially the strong wording that includes lobbying fellow city members, lobbying the state to create the changes to remove these drugs from Schedule 1. I also like to highlight the risk reduction standpoint of this, especially because this is the safety committee. In my experience, when I was working at the co-ops, we were often commended for having such a low transport number of student transports towards hospitals. Part of that was because of a very comprehensive risk reduction and education system, which when I was brought in to consult other student groups throughout the city of Berkeley, they had an aversion to because of the illegal status of many of these substances. Decriminalizing at the city level would actually kind of give that green light to a lot of organizations to feel that they can talk about these freely, they can talk about it without stigma, and actually have the education in place to prevent risk, to mitigate any kind of danger that could occur, so that everyone has a proper knowledge base to experiment if they feel like they want to experiment. Furthermore, the ban on these substances, on these plants, really does stem back to the war on drugs, which even stems back further to the Spanish Inquisition and colonialism. And taking this step to decriminalize it is a step towards undoing centuries and centuries of persecution of people using plants for their own spiritual growth. So I would encourage you all to please go forward with the resolution, keep it as strong as it is with the current lobbying tactics. And I would also encourage the city to partner with nonprofits that specialize in education to create that pathway of kind of safety infrastructure so that the concerns of the gentleman who left can be addressed. So not just decriminalizing it, but making available the safety information. And I also finally like to commend you on including in the whereas kind of a little bit of a trip guide, because I thought that was really cool to have that in the how to be safe while using this. So thank you, and I urge you to please vote on this.
My name is Carolina, and I'm not so good at public speaking, so I wrote something, so please excuse the stutteriness. My name is Carolina. I'm an ethnobotanist and a researcher at the City of Berkeley. My focus within the decriminalization movement has been on education so far. I believe that I believe that most of I strongly believe that part of the misunderstandings that we have around the use of these entheogenic plants has been the dissemination of misinformation and the focus of misuse on these substances rather than using them for good. While my personal research has focused primarily on plants within California native tribal communities, I would also like to bring your attention to the support that is currently being given towards entheogenic plants and therapies by the University of Berkeley at this time. Presently, the university is sponsoring a year-long exhibit which highlights and celebrates the traditional use of these sacred plant medicines. within indigenous CITES and in the world. Plants such as Banisteriopsis, Coleus, and Phaeodosaurosidum and Cannabis and others have been used safely and efficaciously in many places for thousands of years. Additionally, we now have many rigorous studies, scientific studies that show that unlike modern pharmaceutical, entheogens of all classes have relatively low toxicity, high success rates for conditions such as PTSD, drug addiction, anxiety, pain relief, smoking cessation. And likewise, thanks to new research in the compounds present in entheogenic plants, we've discovered their potentiality for neurogenesis, defining and hold promises for new treatments such as Alzheimer's and dementia. While we still have a long way to go, it's become clear that these plants, when used respectfully and responsibly in a responsible manner, can be used for more good than harm. Entheogens above all are tools, and their benefits moving forward will depend on how we choose to frame these medicines within our societies. Thank you.
That was good too. That was good. Good
I'm
presentation.
sorry. I'm so bad at
Good.
public
Good.
speaking.
Yeah. Anyone else? Oh.
Hello, I'm Alex Williams. I was fortunate enough to be on the Oakland Criminalized Nature team. We were very blessed to actually have Susana Velades, who is nominated for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize, actually came and spoke to the Oakland City Council on behalf of the Huichol, or the Huichol, who are indigenous, one of the last remaining indigenous people in Mexico. And her main argument was that the decriminalization is necessary for the indigenous people throughout South America and also Huichol because of the destruction of the peyote deserts and the rainforest because of the criminalization of these substances. What I wanted to get into as far as the Public Safety Committee is concerned is first thing I really want to touch on is that our focus is on making sure these substances are not commercialized. These are sacred plants, and therefore healing, and we don't want to make these some sort of commercial commodity to make much profit or money off of. These are for reintegrating people's relationship with nature. As a veteran myself of the United States Army, and someone who has spoken to and had relationships with many other veterans, these substances and plants have huge benefits in healing PTSD. I work with someone who runs an organization around using these substances to help veterans heal their PTSD, and just the other day I saw them post that someone sent a picture saying, "You saved my life," and a picture of a pistol. It was on the test that they were planning on using to kill themselves with, that they decided not to do. So these are incredibly powerful tools for healing. And they are also extremely sacred in terms of our ability to reconnect with ourselves. They also, Iboga is hugely beneficial and effective in treating addiction, and DMT has been shown that after one use, it mitigates people's fear of death. And what we're asking for is the same thing we had in Oakland, which is basically 1 year to see, just to demonstrate the good this can do for our community, and they can make our community safer, and generally more open and able to heal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Billy? I guess, why should I
You don't
not
have to.
speak? I've never used any of these substances, and I don't have any interest in ever using them. But I do support decriminalization. I think any time that we have to worry about disparate treatment of populations, we should try to move forward with decriminalization.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and thank you, Councilor Robinson, for bringing this forward here. Just a quick question to the city attorney. So, as written, this is a resolution, right?
Yes,
So, can you explain what a resolution is?
versus a municipal code,
Yeah.
like an ordinance. They're both pieces of legislation. Resolutions are typically, because they're not codified in the same manner as a municipal code, they're a little bit less formal.
Okay.
And they have different procedural requirements. For instance, a resolution is effective upon adoption. when it goes to council, not at this level.
Mhm.
Versus a municipal code or an ordinance requires a first reading and a second reading, and then it takes 30 days after the second reading for it to take effect.
Can a resolution, is a resolution more flexible than an ordinance?
Yes.
In what way?
In the procedural sense that if you want to change it, it's easier to change it because you basically go back and rescind the prior resolution and adopt a new one versus having to do like a first reading and a second reading, and then it takes effect 30 days after.
If they both carry the force of law?
I mean, like I said, resolutions are a little bit more flexible and less formal. So I'd be interested to know, it sounds like Oakland passed a resolution to do this?
Yes, they passed a resolution, and it was lowest law enforcement priority, also restricting funds, so that is a basically de facto criminalization.
Yeah. But it sounds like they didn't go the
ordinance.
kind of the more stringent route of doing a
It may mention exactly what you're saying about the flexibility, where it allows then city council to come together if they need to change something, they can do it just by vote or whatever.
More easy. Yeah.
Councilman.
So, I have a question, how much of a problem is this? How many, it would be great to have some data from the police department about whether or not,
In Oakland, they had 19 arrests in 5 years, or 19 cases in 5 years.
Do you know about Berkeley?
I don't know about Berkeley, though.
I was hoping to get this to I don't have those numbers either, but I imagine and presume it's next to nothing. It's not a significant amount.
Next to
TV.
nothing?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, if it's not a problem, why fix it if it's not broken?
If it plays an important role in our end goal of making sure that these things that really shouldn't be Schedule I drugs at the federal level, moving that conversation forward, I think it's the right and appropriate thing to do. And Zach brought up an interesting point too about the meaningful effect that local decriminalization has on education to people who are using these products anyway, where those education modules may not be participated in, or people may be hesitant to offer them unless they know that at the local level law enforcement will actually
So
do that.
I guess my question for those of you in the audience who are experts in this field, this ordinance makes a distinction between plant-based,
So it's not LSD or MDMA.
plant-based drugs, and doesn't really mention chemical or synthetically produced drugs at all. But there are a whole slew of chemically produced and synthetically produced drugs with similar effects, right?
There is, but in the footnote, it's a very specific subset of plants and fungus that have these phenethylamines, tryptamines, and indolamines. And so that takes out all the synthetics. So this does nothing for LSD or MDMA or all the research chemicals or any of that type of stuff, heroin, other things. I mean, there are ways people are looking forward towards a decriminalization of all drugs throughout the U.S., but this one specifically focuses on plant and fungi because of the history of use. There's thousands of years of use with many of these through many different cultures, and they've shown safety over time. I mean, obviously there's risk with anything, but that's where, again, by being able to decriminalize, now organizations like my own or others can actually actively do education for people, and that's really the thing that's missing right now. People that are educated about the proper set and setting are often having a much better experience. They're safer situation, they're knowing how to be responsible, they're not just doing it willy-nilly. So that's a really big part of this, is just letting people come out of the closet and be able to share. There's so many people that are underground doing this work that can't access people. I get emails all day long from people who, I have these issues and where do I go to find somebody to help me, and really can't help them in that way. So these local decriminalization or local decriminalization efforts can really help make people connect with people that can help them, that are doing good work, that are being able to provide good education instead of just like finding something randomly somewhere.
So how do you think decriminalizing will impact the little sub-economy of this black market?
Well, I believe the resolution says no commercial sales and no sales, so I mean, at least the mindset in Oakland was that we could grow our own, we could trade with friends, like if we grow oranges in our backyard, there's no law against growing as many oranges as I want. If I want to trade it with you, that's totally fine. If you want to trade with your pears, then we can trade oranges and pears, that's totally fine, but keeping it out of the, you know, because then you're trusting your community, and a really big part of this is really engaging with your community, making sure that you're together with the community, learning together, and not sort of hidden off into
So
your
there's
room by
no
yourself.
regulation at all on growing?
There is not a regulation on home grows, but manufacturing and commercial sales, there had been a regulation. Also, the regulations were no school ground, no driving, no public disturbance, those types of things, normal things that you would expect.
Yeah, I just from our experience with marijuana, I think that the Community Health Commission is going to be very interested in weighing in on this. Have you done any presentations to them, or?
To the community health of Berkeley?
Yeah,
No.
Not yet, no.
not yet, okay. So whatever we decide, I think it would be, I think it would be good to send it to them.
And I had similar conversations with the city manager who indicated.
Oh,
it's probably gonna
okay.
be the case too.
All right, there.
According to the item tracking,
We could pass it to the council, but modifying the recommendation that it be for council to refer to it.
you can't refer to a commission, but you can refer to another committee. So for example, the Life and Health
Oh,
Enrichment
that's interesting.
Committee, but
Oh.
can't be to a commission.
But can we recommend
Recommend that the council refer
to the
it
council,
commission.
refer it
Yes.
to a commission?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think
Because I'm
that's,
I'm not sure sending it to the council health committee
Yeah, that won't
would
do it.
accomplish much or be necessary, but
Right.
the health commission has its own dynamics. that-
exactly,
I'm on that committee, though,
right.
But-
Good
Well,
choice.
hey, well, then you'd have an item. Could the city clerk's office help us work that into the language and the recommendation? This would be to recommend that the city council refer the policy to the community health commission to
Yes.
adopt the resolution and such.
You could rewrite the item to state that, yes.
Got it.
And resubmit it that way, just as an additional revision, and then that's the way it would be submitted to
I see.
council as it moves
Okay.
forward. So the
Got it.
author would
Okay.
need to do that.
And then in the background, you could say that you discussed it,
Right.
and that
Okay.
was what we came up
So
with.
then the policy committee recommendation would be on there as well, yes, that was passed out.
So if we all approve
Yeah.
it, so it would show up as a positive recommendation from the policy committee, and then my office can submit the additional edits to make sure that the health commission is able to touch base on it before it comes back to council for adoption.
That's correct,
That's
yes.
correct.
We can handle that part.
Good. So is it a motion?
I just wanted to add something. And if you agree with it, that's great. But I also wanted to just kind of add my own 2 cents to this. So we're in the midst right now of a 60s style hallucinogenic renaissance right now, where because due to all the years of research on veterans in particular, these drugs are being decriminalized on the federal level. The scale is being taken down. Ketamine is now federally legal for treatment, and there are popping up as we speak treatment centers all over the country, and there'll be one in Berkeley anytime. And psilocybin is next, and MDMA is going to be year by year by year. So the benefits for health appear to be really strong, and of course the benefits to decriminalization are always good. So I'm curious if the author would want to consider an expansive scope and consider the use of the ones that are coming down the line anyway, like ketamine and MDMA. What?
Ketamine is legal.
Federally, right.
Federally,
I don't know
ketamine
about
is
state.
legal, and,
I don't know.
but this is the thing.
May I-
There are very strict guidelines.
Right.
For how it's administered, for the doses that are beneficial and all of that stuff. So it's
Exactly.
not just grow it in your backyard
Right.
and chew it.
And that's my second point I was going to make. if the author would consider examining sort of guidelines for treatment usage. Because that could be the next level of this kind of policy, because it's useful to treat, depression, PTSD, trauma, suicidal tendencies, things like that.
It is. And the city attorney is making a face, which I think might suggest that it might not be the place
We
for
should
council
go
by
there.
resolution to offer medical advice
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But the broader thought that I am having though, there's so many different angles to this issue, priorities with which to approach it. I'm thinking that the Peace and Justice Commission would have some interesting insight on this too, to provide additional context on the, especially sort of the cultural components of it, which we know is so much of the motivation for the groups advocating for this policy. If we're gonna, I'm not sure it's entirely necessary for it to go the commission route altogether, but if we want the feedback of the Health Commission, I think getting to that other angle to the Peace and Justice Commission would be really valuable, and the council could receive a very comprehensive set of feedback on it before we adopt anything.
May I say something real quick?
Please.
Another big thing that we were talking about in Oakland is that, yes, that is happening with medical treatment. MDMA is going to phase 3 trials. Actually, one of the people with our decrim team, Julie Megler, is Open Sage Integrative Health, which is in Berkeley, which will both be doing the ketamine treatment and the MDMA trials for phase 3. So that's already happening at the FDA trial level. But what that means is that on a local level, it's still, like, most people can't get that treatment. It's like a $10,000 treatment, and people don't have insurance, people can't go to the medical system. So what we were thinking is, let's decriminalize now. Let's not make it a criminal act to actually heal ourselves with our community members. And those things will happen 3, 4, this is the MDMA phase 3 trials will probably be by the end of the next year. So this is happening pretty quickly, and so there'll be an avenue for that. There's a little bit of concern, I know, with the MAPS organization, that if we decriminalize something like MDMA now, that would have a challenge with their FDA trials. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that was something that had been mentioned to us before. But our main model behind this was, let's decriminalize now so that people can access, they don't necessarily have to have, people can still go to those treatments if they have the ability to do that, but let's make it available for everybody.
Interesting. Okay. Make a motion?
Well, I think Liza should make a motion.
Sure. Okay. So we would move the item to council with the understanding that the author will amend the recommendation to refer to the city council to refer this resolution to the Community Health Commission and the Peace and Justice Commission.
Commission?
These are not
I don't get-
codified. I mean, if it were like a drug policy commission,
Oh.
it should be. It is not.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Robinson, can
Yes.
you clarify for me how this falls within the purview of Peace and Justice? I'm confused.
Okay, you examine the equity issues of anthropogenic plants and the cultural spaces within which they've been cultivated and used, and the difficulties of people for whom use of them is culturally significant, to use them under the current Schedule 1 classification, and the effect that decriminalization would have on them. What Molly was just yelling was that, proposing was that, that it go to the Cannabis Commission instead as a drug policy decision-making body, but it's not cannabis, and maybe that would, should the commission have been named something else at some point, maybe.
It was a drug commission.
Well, that would make a lot of sense, actually.
Okay, I don't really care one way or another. I don't really want to slow this down. I
Right.
think it's something that we can move ahead with pretty quickly, so the more we pile on sending it to other commissions, the more,
Right.
so.
And I'm ambivalent. You can, whatever you decide to do is fine with me. However, I would advocate for us to do something new, so we can be first. This, whatever it is.
Third.
We're first in cannabis.
Third.
We can't be third at this. So I
No,
advise the author to
you're
come up with
second.
some new elements that make us first.
Okay, that's her. That's her.
Okay, so there's a
We're
motion
gonna
on the
send
floor.
it to the Health Commission, and just the Health Commission. That is the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Golden.
Excellent. So, with that, good job. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone.